Hey everybody, it's hwsteele. In this video I want to talk to you about the magical number 153. Now, is this number really magical? No more so than any other number probably. I mean, it's just a natural number which follows 152 and precedes 154. This is the Wikipedia page. If you want to look it up, you'll find all the details because I'm only going to go over a little bit of this here. But I wanted to bring this number up because it can be found in the Bible, specifically in the Gospel of John in the 21st chapter. And just remember that 21 is 7 times 3 now. And it brings up the miracle of the catching of the 153 fish, which when you really think about it, it's kind of strange that they would count the number of fish. Right? Well, maybe not necessarily. If it's their business to be fishermen, they probably keep track of that kind of stuff. But the fact that it's mentioned, 153, isn't an accident. Now, also keep in mind that this miracle happened as the third appearance of Jesus after his resurrection, and that's probably important. So those are things to keep in mind there. So what does the Bible mean? And there's a little something also. That number was hidden in the Bible with this. I'll let you study that part or research that yourself. What's so special about the number 153? Well, like I said, it goes to the Vesica Pisces, which is this shape right here that is derived by putting two identically sized circles over each other so that the edge of one circle goes over the midpoint, the exact midpoint of the other circle. And when you do that, obviously the two midpoints are covered by the edges of each other's circle. But it creates this little shape right here, kind of the shape of an eye or an almond, or more specifically the Vesica Pisces, which literally means the bladder of a fish, due to the fact that the shape of this is it's very similar to the air bladders or swim bladders found in most fish. So, people name things because they reminded them of something else usually. But this has a very specific and special relationship, this shape does. If you consider this point and this point, or the measurement of these 2 points, as 1 or par, the measurement of this point to this point is equal to approximately 1.732. which is the square root of 3. And if you'll remember in the story in the Bible that the number 3 does seem to play a bit of a role there. So that's probably not an accident that they used this number 153. Now, back in the old days, they didn't really use the decimal system like we did, and they didn't necessarily know that this square root of 3 was an irrational number, meaning you cannot ever calculate it to perfection. It just keeps the precision just keeps getting higher and higher and higher and higher, and it will never calculate out. But thousands of years ago, they figured out this fraction right here, 265 over 153, as an extraordinarily close representation of the square root of 3. And I'll give you an example of that. If we take 3 and find the square root, there we go, we see that the square root of 3 is 1.732, and then it goes on and on. Well, if we take 265 and divide it by 153, I did not write that correctly. If we take 265 and divide it by 153, we get the same 1.732, and then you have to get way out here into the 4th and 5th number past the decimal point to see some imperfection. So it's very accurate, that fraction is. So it's very, very close to the square root of 3. Now, one thing I want to point out is the bottom number there, the denominator, is our 153. So in this case, the 153 is the par, or the 1. It's the shorter measurement of the distance here. And the 265, which I will point out very quickly is one less than 266, and that might just be significant, is the equivalent of the square root of 3 that shows up right there like that. So something that you might not have realized is that if you add up 265 and 153, you get the magical 418, or the number of numbered pages in W.D. Gann's 1927 novel, The Tunnel Through the Air. So that's probably significant. Now, let's find the square root of that. 20.44. I'll let you dig into that if you choose to do so. But I'll show you something else about the number 153. If we find the square root of this number, it's 12.369. Now, what's important about that? Right off the bat, probably nothing is really coming to mind. But one thing I recommend doing, and have done so in previous videos, is that whenever you get a significant number that seems to be important for one reason or another, whether it's in the Bible like 153, or it just shows up for some reason, find the square root of it and find the square of it. Okay? Now, getting back to our 12.369. Why is that important? Well, it turns out that the square root of 153 just happens to be the number of sun-moon lunar cycles, or new moon to new moon cycles, in a year. So if we multiply that 12.369 times 29.53 days in that new moon cycle, we get 365.26 or 27 days. So it's very, very close to being very, very close to being accurate to the number of days in a year. So this brings up another point. When you find numbers that seem to be important, and then you find the square root or squares of those numbers, it's a really good idea to start manipulating those numbers by known time periods. Okay, specifically the lunar, the solar, and other planetary time periods, because very frequently you'll find relationships that are quite interesting. And then it comes, the idea or question comes to mind that there could be some sort of reference to these relationships and what might be important. And by that, I mean, there are other numbers in the Bible that if you find the square root of, it turns out that those square roots are actually an amount of time multiplied by a time factor. So if you remember in the other video I did about W.D. Gann time factors, we talked about, it was specifically the 1,913 days between Marie Stanton disappearing and then reappearing in the book, which just happens to be, divide that by the lunar orbital period, 70 orbits of the moon, right? So that means that Gann's, or the orbital period of the moon, which is quite obviously a cycle, becomes a time factor because it gets multiplied by another number. And when the cycle period gets multiplied by another number, this instance just happens to be 70, we get another period of time. So as a result, the 70 becomes a time factor also. That I did not mention in the previous video I did about time factors, but it's a very, very important point to remember. Okay, I'm not going to talk any more about that for now. So to do a quick recap here, the number 265 over 153 is a representation of the square root of 3 as a fraction. There's another one right here. In fact, this fraction comes out to just below the square root of 3, and this fraction comes out to just above the square root of 3. Actually, I just said that backwards. That's greater than the square root of 3, and the square root of 3 is greater than this one. So, anyway, The point I'm making is study these numbers, look at them, and one thing I'm going to say really quickly is remember that this is a two-dimensional representation. Okay, so if for some reason you decide you want to start applying this to, say, stock charts or Forex charts or commodity charts, remember that it's two-dimensional, not one-dimensional. Okay? Okie dokie. Well, that's all I'm going to do for today with this number. Tomorrow I'm going to get back into I'm actually going to start the new series I have been doing. Actually, I might not be able to get to it tomorrow. It might come out on the 17th, which is Monday, December 17th. So look for the new video in the new series about working with all the chart reading stuff that I had done previously. And we'll start looking at making some forecasts and seeing how they turn out.